What's good, y'all? Riley Beats here, and today we're going to be talking about melody sound selection. I did a drum version of this, and now I'm going to do a melody version. So if you could leave a like, comment, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated, and let's get right into it. So if you don't know, I'm currently working on a MIDI kit. This video will probably drop by the time the MIDI kit is out, so a link for that will be down in the description. I'm just going to be using a MIDI from that kit to explain my process with sound selection. Let's just pull up a random one. Here's how this one sounds. That's all good and dandy. So when I'm doing sound selection for my melodies, I like to just listen to the basic MIDI on FL keys because it kind of gives me an idea of what I'm going for. So just listening to this MIDI, I kind of get the idea that it should be more of a soft piano melody. And there's two main things that you want to keep in mind when you're doing sound selection, and that's softness and harshness. Do you want your melodies to be harsh? Do you want them to be soft? So here I just have a basic piano from Contact. And this is just the default sound, so let's say I make this really hard. When I do that, the tone of the melody completely changes. And now let's say I make it soft. Probably not all the way soft, that'd be a little bit too much. So as you can tell, a softer melody kind of sounds a little bit more emotional, and a more harsh melody sounds a little bit more aggressive. Another thing to keep in mind with your melodies is space. So things like reverb add space, and space can really add atmosphere and depth to your melodies, and that's just something to keep in mind. You don't always have to add it. Some melodies are better off without adding atmosphere, just because it adds to the bounce or adds to the sharpness of the sounds. For this though, it really feels like it needs a lot of space. So another thing to keep in mind when you're doing sound selection for your melodies is good quality sounds. That's an example of a bad sound just because you can hear a lot of the frequencies kind of clashing together. So I'll even pull it up in EQ. I hate that sound. So here's how this looks in the parametric EQ 2. You can see there's a lot going on here and a lot going on here, and especially in these narrow bands. So if we just boost that, you can hear a lot of just dissonance, just bad sound in that section. And if you want to make your sound a little bit better, you can just cut that sound out a little bit. You don't have to cut it out all the way. Usually I just do like a 4 decibel cut. I did mention this is a bad example of a sound just because it's got multiple spots of that. And that just cleans it up a little bit. Here's the difference between the two. It doesn't save the sound, mind you. So the easiest way to tell if a sound is actually a good sound and not a bad sound is if it's not exhausting or painful to listen to. I know that should be a given, but there are a lot of melodies out there that I've heard personally from people where the sounds in the melodies can be painful on the ears. And finally, sound selection for your own compositions. If you don't know what kind of vibe you're going for, or you don't know what kind of sounds would fit the composition you have, what I would genuinely suggest is just to keep listening to it until you kind of get the vibe. It's okay to go with a safe sound like a piano or a flute or a guitar or bells. Just something basic is okay. You don't have to do anything crazy. But oftentimes it is okay as well to do something crazy. Going back to that MIDI kit I was talking about earlier, I'll just pull up another melody. So we can tell the bell doesn't fit in this instance, just because there's a lot of notes going on, the bell's clashing, it's being held for too long. Typically bells don't get held for that long. So you can already kind of get the impression that this would be something more keys or pad or something like that. Let's just pull up like a pad or something. This probably wouldn't work on a pad, to be very honest with you. Yo, I stand corrected, that actually sounds really good on the pad, but that sounds more of like a backing track. So going back with that soft versus harsh sound thing that I mentioned earlier, you can use this when you're selecting the sounds you want to use for your melodies, because typically you can listen to the composition and you can kind of get the vibe of, is this something I want to be more aggressive? Is this something I want to be more sad? Do I want this melody to be more in the listener's face, technically ears? And I know for this melody in particular, this is more of a sad melody. So with that being said, this would be another probably softer sound melody. Pull up even a very basic sound actually. So I know I mentioned earlier this might not work very well with bells just because the notes are extended. But I did find a bell, you might recognize this bell sound. And overall this bell is a little bit more soft. And so that kind of adds to the emotional feel here. I know I said finally for that last point, but finally again, we're going to talk about leads. And this is kind of something that you want to keep in mind if you're ever doing a lead or some kind of melody of that sort. So if we're thinking about leads, there are many instruments that you can use as a lead, like a flute or genuinely just a synth lead. If you're using a lead, you want this to be some kind of center focus of the melody. I'm just going to pull up a flute. I know for a fact this does not sound good on a flute. Well, maybe it will. Yeah, doesn't really sound good on a flute. And this kind of plays more into the entire composition of your melody. So I know for a fact that this melody is a bit more on the synth side, so I would go to something like Serum. And pretty much for this, the same kind of thing of harshness versus softness kind of plays a role here. But again, if you have a lead, you want to kind of stick to some kind of lead instrument. So that would greatly differ from a piano, for example. I'll just open this with FL keys. As you can probably tell, it just doesn't have that same sound. Anyways, thank you all for watching. This has just been a few of my tips for sound selection and a few of the things I think about when going through the sound selection process. If you could leave a like, comment, and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. And again, thank you. Peace.